Did all 5 seconds show up on that? Anyway. So what if it didn't? Okay. Well, good evening. This is Coach Prasick, and my camera is working again. If you were here for the last segment, you noticed it kind of went poof right in the middle. So we just kind of came in on a wing and a prayer last hour. But we're back to full strength now, and it's a good thing because, as you can tell by the picture on the wall behind me, it's time to take a trip around. Oh man, did I mess that up? Look, folks. We're still recovering, okay? I'm going to fix it before we do, okay? I know that doesn't look exactly right behind me, but this does. Here he is in live and in person, J.D. Wininger from the Cross W Ranch in Cooper, Texas. And J.D., I have, I almost called you a couple of times because I wanted to kind of check on you. And not that I hadn't had problems here. But I have kind of anticipated. I knew it was coming. I just didn't know what form it would take. But your blog this week captured my heart, and I think many of the others. And I can't wait to start preaching. Folks, if you haven't read JD's blog this week, well, you're not doing the internet correctly. You need to go to jdwininger.com. And read it. And I say that sort of lightheartedly, but the subject matter of your blog was anything but lighthearted.
Well, thanks, Coach. I appreciate that. Was it a serious topic? Yes. Did I write it with a certain amount of joy in my heart? I certainly did, sir. It's funny. I think most folks here at PJNet know that my adopted dad, well into his 90s, passed on a few weeks ago. Needed to take a week off and deal with family, and appreciate everybody's cards and notes and comments and things. But this post kind of usurped another one, and we'll get it out to you next week, Coach. But this one, I received my brother Paul's Bible there on the shelf behind me. I had loaned that to Dad when I took him back to Florida because he didn't have one handy, and got that. And then my LBS, my little big sister, as I call her, Susie, was there, and she was handling Dad's estate and things as we all knew she would be as the executress. And she texted me one day, or emailed me, I guess it was, and Jim, do you want the Model T? And I went, no, thank you. I'll pass. Let my brother Raymond keep it. He's got a garage, so he can repair it and keep it operational and everything. And Dad would have a fit of one of my old barn cats. He'd look down from heaven, saw one of my old barn cats sitting on the seat. So that wouldn't be so good. Yeah. So I understood that, but I said, as we're talking about memorabilia or memory items, the thing that comes to mind, that one of the things that I would treasure the most, sis, would be Dad's old brass embossing stamp, and the one that he keeps on his desk that he uses on all his checks. Yeah, not a problem. I said, well, if no one else wants it, I'd love that, and there it is, folks. That's it. It's just this big old brass. It's not quite so brassy anymore. It's all tarnished and worn and things. But see the big handle, and it comes down and it embosses or impresses my dad's seal, as you see on the screen to your left there. And I remember at 15 seeing Dad paying bills one night, shop bills, and he'd grab that thing, wonk, and emboss every check right over the memo field. Mm-hmm. And well, Dad, why in the world are you doing that? And he really taught me a lesson then that I'll just never forget. And receiving Dad's embossing stamp after his passing kind of reminded me of that lesson. And what happened is I just asked him, Dad, why do you do that to every check? You signed it already. That's what we learned in school back when they taught check writing and how to balance
when people
checkbooks
still wrote checks.
Exactly. And So he took a piece of paper and he stamped it out, and he said, "Feel that." And it's funny because I've got his embossed seal right here on my laptop in front of me, and every morning I kind of started just run my hands over his initials, and from the desk of,
Hmm.
and it's almost like I'm just caressing Daddy's cheek again.
Hmm.
And but he tried to explain it to me. He said, that seal, that's my mark, that's my brand. It's mine, and nobody else has got one like it. He said, and what that is, Jim, is that's my guarantee that I'm going to stand behind everything that bears that stamp. And I thought, wow, that kind of makes it official and things, right? And I thought that pretty cool. But what Dad was teaching me is what it meant to ride for the brand. Your name, your brand means something. It stands for something, and it's like the Crust W brand that we have here at the ranch. It stands for quality. It stands, it communicates that we put Christ first in everything that we do here
Yeah.
on the ranch. And I want that message to be carried out, just like Dad wanted his initials, SEA, to stand and mean something. And I looked back and I thought about, what that meant, what words like honor and integrity weren't just words to my dad. He lived them. He showed us his example by living them out in his life. Best example I could give you for that is as a young fella, even after I'd uh, left the shop years earlier, and had been in the military and came home, I'd go to the bank or I'd go to a store and I'm looking for store credit or something to buy something. Young married guy, and well, you're one of Mr. Adams's boys, aren't you? Yes, sir. That's all I needed to say. There
Hmm.
was no collateral needed. His good name was all that was needed in the little community that I lived in, Coach. And I carried that with me, and it made me think. Dad had a brand, if you will. He had a mark, and his mark was impressed upon every one of his children, and more. The people in our community, his customers and his friends, all knew that old Stewie stood for something, and that's a pretty neat legacy to carry, isn't it? Is that people uh, remember what you stood for, what kind of a man or woman you were, and that's important. So I kind of asked the question, what does your brand mean to you? And does your brand, like my Cross W brand, does it show Christ's presence in your life? Do people know that you're a child of God by the way you present yourself, the way you act? Or, as you put it once, Coach, and it's one of my favorite sayings, is I pray that nobody learns at my funeral that I was a Christian, right? And it just really stands out to me. So that's the, excuse me, that's the memory item that I received from my dad's estate. But the interesting thing, and it's a pretty old stamp because 15 for me was a lot of years ago, and I don't know how long he had it before he adopted me at 14. But I've got that stamp. But I remember when he was here in Texas, he would stamp a check because he sat right across from Miss Diane in her office when he would do his bills on Quicken, and he'd print a check and he'd emboss that sucker, and put it in an envelope, and I'd take it out to the mailbox for him. But I noticed that the top part of that stamp wasn't imprinting so well. You could barely make out what it
Hmm.
was. It was hardly legible anymore. So I said, okay, well, it's like me. It's old and worn out. So I got looking at it, and that's when I applied what Dad had taught me years and years ago about problem solving. Shine some light on it, right, so you can see what you're doing, especially under a hood. But it was always examine the issue, stop and look, see what the problem is, see what's going on, examine it, and then understand the root cause. What's causing that, right? And once you've done that, then derive a corrective action and apply it. and make sure that it works, right? Check your work. And I thought about that lesson, and I said, okay, well, if I'm this old embossing stamp, this lever's got a pin in it, right, in the center.
Hmm.
And that pin, as you can tell, that's pretty wobbly there, right? You can see it moving back and forth, and so it's worn out. And from the top plate to the lever is a piston, just a metal rod. And I'm going, you know what? This thing has been used thousands and thousands of times. I'm guessing over my dad's lifetime. And there's a good chance that that metal on metal, and if it's anything like my knee with no cartilage, it's worn out, right? So I lowered that plate and went, sure enough, it's kind of concave instead of flat. So I said, okay, well, let's try this. So I've identified the problem. The root cause is just worn out from age and use. So I put a penny in between that upper plate, and I know you can't see it on the camera, Coach, and the piston. And I took my little post-it note and I embossed a little post-it note, and it came out perfect. It's the one that's on my laptop here that I can feel the texture of Daddy's mark, of Daddy's seal, right? And that it worked perfectly. So, naturally I went, okay, Dad, we got another one. Thanks, buddy, for that lesson. And it's funny how you carry those life lessons with you through life. But we did that, and of course, I'm thinking about how that lever's been depressed, and pressures applied to that stamp to create that to that die, if you will. And it made me think of 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 8 through 10. We're hard pressed on all sides, as Paul talked about, right? And that's what happens, and it can wear you down. So, making that correction was pretty cool. But, when we stop and think, and all of us have lost loved ones, Coach, be that a parent, and most of us here in the chat room have lost or will lose a parent in their life. Worse, a child, as you spoke about, just I can't fathom what that has to feel like, or your spouse, and that just, that tears you apart. It has to, because, when man and wife become one, and then you lose one of them, you've lost half yourself, haven't you? Because you're not complete anymore. That's got to be what goes through my mind as to what that's like to be a widow or a widower, Coach. But I see that thing, but I think of how much those that we have loved and have gone on before us have enriched our lives. What marks, what legacy have they left in our lives, Coach? And the same thing happens with God, right? I know that we are sealed by the Holy Spirit upon our salvation, Coach. And does God emboss, or does God impress? Hey, Jim is mine, right? JD belongs to me. Do not touch, property of God. Period. End of discussion. Is that there? What is that? But I ask people to think about, Coach. Will you consider what mark God has left on your life? How has God changed you, right? And if you're not changed, if you can't say, here's the marks that God has left on my life, here's the words that He's written in my heart and things. If you can't do that, then folks, you got to question yourself. Are you there or not? As our buddy Vid Cooper, and I didn't see him in the chat room tonight. I think
he
he's
took another road
TDY,
trip.
Coach.
I think he took another road trip.
Yeah, I think he's on a trip.
Because I called him today and it went to voicemail.
Is if you is what you was, you ain't. And that one hits right at the heart of the matter, doesn't it? So I thought about that, and you know what? If folks can't see what God has done in their life, there's a fix for that, and you can apply the same problem technique that my daddy taught me. You can apply the Father's problem-solving technique. You can examine the issue, and that's you're not saved, right? So there's a lack of salvation. You can identify the root cause, and that's pretty simple. Adam and Eve failed, right, in the Garden of Eden. There's a sin curse upon all of mankind. And you can apply the corrective action. You can apply the saving balm of grace through salvation through Christ. And that's such an important thing. So, I looked at my dad's embossing stamp, that I received, and I thought, Dad left an indelible mark upon my life in many areas, in many ways. In fact, poor Miss Diane will tell you, geez, you're getting more and more like your father every day. And of course, I tell her, yeah, well, you're just getting more and more like your mama every day. So we see that and we take on those characteristics and things. But I pray that we also take on the characteristics of our Lord and Savior, who has marked us as His, and we carry His legacy forward to others. I know my adopted mom and dad and family did, because they taught this wayward young man what God's love really looked like, Coach. I'm going to shut up and let you preach a while, buddy.
Oh, can I talk now? There's a lot, and I don't have any notes, but there's so much. First of all, you mentioned that I had made a comment that you found impressionable upon you, and I'm actually not the inspiration of that comment. I know I've shared this with you, but in case somebody was not watching years ago when I shared that, I'd like to share it now. I was observing when Whitney Houston died, her funeral, and these people were eulogizing her, as is part of the protocol, when you have these. And I kept hearing these people say that, she was a Christian. And the thought came upon me, oh, I didn't know she was a Christian.
Right.
And that's when it hit me. That's when it hit me. And it's had an impact on me ever since, because you're right. If someone finds out you're a Christian at your funeral, maybe there's some improvements you can make on your Christian walk. Do you still write checks, JD?
Yes, sir. Still write checks. I just sent one to my editor this morning.
Yeah, the old paper Quicken check.
Oh,
you
yes,
sign it and
yes,
all
sir.
that. Mm-hmm.
I do it on QuickBooks for my business and my writing business and things. And I write personal checks. I just had to write one for that ton of fertilizer I put out last month. So
yeah, you had to write two checks. It's doubled. It's
it hurts.
Yeah, one check won't cover it. You got to write two now. And okay, the seal that your father used, is that 1.67 inches or is it 2 inches in diameter?
You know what, Coach? I'd have to say it's probably 1.67 if I had to guess. It's a little less than 2
They're
inches.
basically two standard size seals, and
okay.
There's no significance between them. There's no, but
Yeah.
the seal. I did a little research on this. I know it's been a very frustrating afternoon for me, but I wanted to do some research, and I did it very helter-skelter, but I found a bunch of stuff that I kind of already knew, but it's good to have it affirmed. The seal goes back to the days of kings.
Yes.
The king had a special ring that was his insignia.
A signet ring, yes.
Signet, there you go. And they would use wax and impress that king's ring on the parchment. It wasn't really paper back then, but that served one of the purposes of a seal. A seal is still very much a legal concept. One thing, it authenticated that this is from the king. This is from whoever it says it's from. So it serves as an authenticating mechanism, but it actually, in addition, we don't really need that these days. We pretty much know how to tell forgeries from authentic. We have things like witnesses. We have things like notary publics who use, guess what, a seal. The legal requirements of seal, to be a seal, has to be round. Did you know that? Has to be round.
Didn't know that.
Has to be round. When you go set up a bank account for a corporation, you have to have a corporate resolution, and if you don't have your corporate seal yet, they will take a quarter and you'll trace that quarter, and it bear for corporate seals, at least in this state, must bear the year of incorporation as a part of the seal. But I don't know if all states do that. But the other thing a seal does is it adds legal gravity. It adds legal gravity, okay, in addition to authenticating. So think about a real estate transaction. That's a lot of money, usually. And a lot of extra measures are taken to make sure that the parties, or each party, is protected, or any title deed. For example, if you have a car title or a birth certificate, it will bear the seal of the issuer, which is usually the state of domicile for that document. And the seal is round. Okay, it may not be an impressed seal, but it is nonetheless a seal. In real estate, they add the seal to the deed because it verifies that this is the consummation of a two-party agreement. And the agreement is the contract for purchase and sale, where there's an offer, there's acceptance, there's consideration, and they're all legalese. But the deed itself is not a bilateral instrument. It's a unilateral instrument. I'm deeding this to you, or you're deeding this to me. It's a covenant. It's not a contract.
Yes.
It's a covenant.
Right.
So it bears the seal saying that if I have sold you this land and I'm not the rightful owner and don't have the rights, that seal is a legal instrument that says, and I stand behind it, even if later it's found out to be flawed. Mm-hmm. Very powerful. Yeah. It's kind of gone by the wayside, but seal, adding the word seal, you can even put in parentheses, seal, after your signature. Yeah. That adds legal gravity to it in this state.
You were talking about real estate. That's what my Miss Diane did until she retired. She did title searches and did all that research and all that work for real estate transactions. She was a paralegal in a law firm that and focused on the real estate department. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And when there's a real estate transaction, there is usually property insurance. You don't really need to insure a piece of ground. It can't be destroyed very easily. But
and title insurance, you have to have that to cover the
right.
In case something gets discovered after you've purchased the land.
Right.
The title insurance reimburses you for that.
Well, what that does is bonds the issuer. For example, I can make you a promise, but if I can't back that promise up monetarily, it's a pretty empty promise. That brings us to another portion of the depth of the idea of a seal. Is it has to be bonded. Now, there's a phrase in culture that says, his word is his what?
His bond.
His bond. See, words are cheap, aren't they?
Yes, sir.
They can be, anyway. They aren't necessarily, but words can be cheap. And as I read your blog this week, my mind was taken back to when my father-in-law died, and he and I had a very special relationship for not being blood related. He was like a brother to me, and I remember my wife's cousin, who was an ordained minister, officiated in part that ceremony. Now, he probably spoke for 15 minutes. And he talked about a lot of good things, I'm sure, but I remember one thing that he said. He said, when Wallace said something, it meant what he said. And then he also enumerated some others in the family who had gone to be with the Lord. When Mr. Granger, his grandfather, Ralph Granger, when he said something, you could go to the bank on it. You could count on it. Yep. Is that something that's getting lost in our contemporary culture?
I think it is, Coach. And part of that reason, I think, is because truth, or what is true, has become so distorted. Satan has convinced the world, and I think of that movie. Uh, I'm going to
The
mess it up.
Matrix.
Sniper, I think it was called. Where there was a Marine Corps sniper, and supposedly he was set up to shoot a bishop or somebody from South Africa or something. And they were actually hoping to eliminate the president or something. But he had to fight to clear his name and everything. But it ended up, it was this big cover up, and there was this big fat senator, swilling whiskey, saying the truth is what I say it is, and he's rattling the ice in his class. And I'm going, you know what? That's become society today. The truth is what it's defined as, whether that's the crooked politicians of the world or the anti-social media fact checkers on Facebook and places, or the media, the news media that tells you, well, this is the truth. They no longer report the truth and the facts. Everything is spin. Everything is relative. And they've said truth is relative, and I'm sorry, truth is true.
No, truth is absolute.
And the only place in this world there's real truth today is in God's Word.
Mm-hmm.
And people want to subvert that. Well, God's not the moral authority. Yes, He is. God invented morality. He invented you, Sparky. But they refuse to accept that. Right? They look for alternatives. So things like truth and honor and dignity and integrity. A man's word is his bond. I shared a post earlier. It's funny is suits and contracts have replaced overalls and a handshake. Right? It used to be you make a deal with somebody, and I traded a steer for a winter's worth of hay just this past couple of weeks. And it was a win-win for everybody. He's got 5 kids he's got to feed, and a freezer full of beef will go a long way to do that. That helps. And I've got a barn full of hay so that I can keep raising more beef, right? Mm-hmm. So it worked out well. But that was all done on a handshake. There was no legal documents and invoices and billing back and forth and everything. It was just a handshake between me and old Mr. Sam.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well,
that's the way it's supposed to be.
I asked that question anticipating your answer because I've known you for a little while, and I kind of knew you'd pass that test, and you did. Because you called out the politicians. You see, when leadership is caught in lies and insincerities and deceptions, that's different from the guy down on the street corner selling Rolex watches with 2 L's. Yeah. We have a different expectation, a different standard for people in leadership positions. And I don't know the exact citation or the exact address, but I can certainly paraphrase. In the book of James, it says, not all should be teachers. And those who are should be aware that teachers are held to a higher standard. Yes. Because as a teacher, you're a leader. I know people sometimes do things with good intentions, but it doesn't rub me right when a teacher gets in front of a class and says, well, I'm not really a teacher, I'm just a facilitator. I thought, no, sir, no, ma'am. If you were a teacher,
that's for a meeting. That's not for learning.
Right. If you were a teacher, you are the tip of the spear. You are the authority. You are the captain. Okay? The captain of a ship is an awesome responsibility. The captain is never wrong. The captain has to be right all the time. I had a question for you, and you may not be able to answer in full detail. But you talked about the uniqueness of a seal, which is part of the authenticity thing, the authentication. But it's pretty well known that in the military you are issued a rifle,
Yes.
and the mantra goes, this is my rifle. There are many like it, but this one
Yeah.
is mine.
Yes.
And that rifle has what? A serial.
Serial number.
And I bet if I called upon you to give me the serial number of your rifle, I bet you could still do it.
I can on my M24, Coach. I
Yeah.
can tell you that serial
Hmm.
number.
There are some
I
rifles
can't
that
tell you on my sidearm and
yeah.
things.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yes.
And but just because those rifles are mass produced, it has a serial number that makes it special because it's yours. It belongs to you, even though it is, for all intents and purposes, identical to thousands and tens of thousands of others. But
Yeah.
sometimes we think that we are the same. We think we are just another person drifting through life on this planet.
No.
That's not true. Each
No,
one
sir.
of us
Not at
is
all.
unique, and you could say, well, the DNA code is unique, and that's true almost all the time, unless you have a twin, unless you were born as twins, in which
Yeah.
case, but even so, twins are identifiable one from the other. So anyway, I digress. But JD,
No,
I
and it's a good point, Coach. There's many similarities between rifles, and there's many similarities between people. Doug Carter and I are both writers. Doug Carter and I are both teachers in our own ways. Uh, Doug Carter, uh, however, has many special gifts and just to name a couple of gifts, he's got a wonderful gift of prophecy. Right, he can see things. He can take a 30,000 foot view of things and break that down so that people like me can understand it. I'd like to think that I have the gift of encouragement, that I try to help others, but we both have the gift of helps, right? We both look to be servants to other people and to help other people. So there's similarities, but God makes us each unique, and God gives each of us within the body of Christ similar and different gifts, so that when we come together, Coach, we create that complete picture of Christ in our service. And He does that so that we can serve one another, I think, Coach. Yeah,
and serve the Lord in doing so, and glorify the Lord
yes,
in doing so. Even
absolutely.
I just wanted to say that I knew that you would write something as a tribute to your father, and I didn't know what form it would take, but I certainly did not expect the seal. But I can't think of a more fitting tribute to a man that has made literally an impression on
Absolutely.
not only so many pieces of paper, but on
Yeah.
so many people.
Well,
And
it,
I love it.
yes, sir. That's that, and I couldn't help but think of our buddy Ken Edwards, right,
Hmm.
and the footprint for God that my dad left, and that's
Hmm.
the title of Kenny's book,
Hmm.
and the legacy that he left behind, not just in his children, not just in me, but in his grandchildren and his great grandchildren. They will grow up, and I remember working with my sister and my dad on what would be my great grandfather, although I never got to meet him, Damon, who was a farmer up in western Massachusetts, and he had a diary. So, how did he know that that would be something that would inspire me to write about the farm and ranch life that I live? Because that's what my great grandpa Damon did, 3 generations before I ever came along in a part of that family. So it's funny to see how God works, and God puts us in places and puts people into our lives to make those kinds of impressions upon us, Coach. So I hope lots more folks get a chance to read the blog and comment upon it. I always welcome those comments.
I hope you're right, JD. And we appreciate you sharing. We'll see you next week, brother.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone.
Love you,
Have a
brother.
blessed evening, Coach.
All right. Well, hey, guess what? You can see the view again for the first time in a few days, high atop the Eagle's Nest, the broadcast facilities here at pjnet.tv. Have you been blessed tonight? I have. We have some good people on our team. God, thank you. Thank you for sending your servants. You and JD, we've already gone long. I could just go on and on. I really could. We're so blessed. I'm so blessed to have so many people. Or it's not how many, it's the quality, of the people that visit, our chat room and hang out and listen. I thank God for each one of you. And I thank God for the people who make themselves available to appear right up there and share their walk with Christ. There's more. Lots more. Let's go find them. Bring them in. I'll be back tomorrow night. No, I won't. Oh, no, tonight's Thursday. That's it. For me. PJ Net is on the air Friday night. Steve Hazards takes the helm. Starts up with some music about 9 o'clock. But that's just the warm-up. It's good. Some retro tunes, some jazz. Something different. And but come 10 o'clock, he will uncork my perspective and comment. And I always look forward to that. And I hope that you will too. Hope you'll come join us for that. I get the night off. And this weekend will mark the last weekend of my day job. I will be retiring from that as of August the 8th, Sunday. A little scary. What will you be remembered by? What will be your legacy? I'm glad JD brought that up. Because as I think about it, you won't be remembered for being ordinary. Hopefully we won't be remembered for being cowards. Hopefully we'll be remembered by our courage. And here's the way I keep a check on that for me, and I'll share it with you. What is the boldest thing that you have ever done for Jesus Christ? And how long ago was it? And for our own sake, for the sake of the legacy that we leave behind, and for the sake of the kingdom in which we serve, and the Lord who is crown of that kingdom, I certainly hope that none of us will be satisfied with our answers to either of those two questions.